Welcome, and thank you for joining me on the Spiritual Ninja podcast, where we have heart to heart conversations with people who live with spiritual depth and elite performance. Hello, Greg. Welcome to the Spiritual Ninja podcast. I'm really looking forward to our time together.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here.
I really love hearing people's spiritual experience because everyone has their own unique experience, even if they're in the same religion or same spiritual practice. I have this belief that there's one spirit, but many paths. And so I'd really love if you would share your spiritual journey, if you recall when it started, how it started, maybe your experience from when you began your spiritual journey to today, any practices you want to share with us. I find people really enjoy hearing people's unique practices that they do. They're helpful.
Yeah, thank you. There's sort of two parts. Part one was I grew up one of the second of six children, parents and cradle Catholics. You never missed a Sunday. You never missed the sacraments. It was certainly ritual-oriented as well as age-oriented. In second grade, you went to Holy Communion and went through penance. Eighth grade, you got confirmed. And I found myself at the United States Military Academy as a young cadet. And I found that if you went to daily mass at 6 a.m. in the morning, you could avoid being harassed by the upperclassmen. And you actually got to go to breakfast late and not be abused at the table. So I found the habit of daily mass for the next 4 years to be very grounding. I got involved with this very well-known retreat program in the Catholic Church called TEC, To Encounter Christ, Teens Encounter Christ, Troops Encounter Christ. And it was a weekend experience where you came in on a Friday, you built small table group communities. You listened to talks from people who had gone through their spiritual journeys. And essentially, many Catholics come to their faith through their hereditary, their ancestry, as opposed to a choice they make. And these weekend experiences were meant to sort of help each person go through the weekend to have their own personal relationship with God. So I found myself getting involved in that. I became an Army officer, got married, went off to Italy, and found myself drawn, as I had been as a cadet, to the church and getting involved with music as well as other spiritual experiences. And did that for a good portion of my young and middle adulthood. But there was a time in my early 40s when I was really struggling internal with just who was I and was I living the life I was meant to. And I spent a lot of time in my head of praying to God for help me be a better human being. I'm not, my self-esteem was very low. And a dear friend said, you could use some help. And I come from, all of my siblings and my father were in the military as well. And in my family, you didn't ask for help and you certainly didn't tell anybody you needed it. But I was led to a pastor, retired pastor, social worker, therapist by the name of Kempton Haynes. He was 82. We would meet in his sort of a large room with these big stuffed chairs on Monday evenings. And he just listened to me tell my story. And eventually, by the fourth time we met, he said, I'd hate to be your wife. And I was sort of surprised by that answer. And I said, well, Kempton, please explain. And he says, it's clear that you have a model of faith that's all about what you earn, what you accomplish, what you achieve. And you make other people responsible for your joy and happiness, whether that's other people or it's accomplishing things. And that was probably one of the greatest epiphanies of my life, that indeed, if you'd listened to my inner dialogue with God, it was, God, help me be something I'm not, be a better man, be kinder, be gentler, be more compassionate. And I didn't listen very well, but Kempton triggered something. And I went home and told my wife and said, tell me, do I make you responsible for my happiness? Do you feel that? And she said acutely, we had 4 children, 3 in high school, a toddler. And she says, yeah, you're like my 5th child. And I'm kind of getting tired of it. And I attribute that was my faith epiphany, where my prayers changed, my spirituality changed, because I saw that I had been living my life so much out of what I was not and striving towards something that one day I would be happy, one day I would be grace-filled. One day I would be all of these things. And what that epiphany led me to is, first and foremost, the fact that I have been born into this world in the year 1959 with 2 parents who both loved me. I grew up in wonderful places. I've been well supported. I've gotten to go to the most extraordinary schools, West Point, the Harvard Business School, taught at Yale. And, my life has been a gift. And, this notion of, God, please save me. Instead, it was, God, I was saved the moment I was born. I
Hmm.
have been given so much privilege and so much opportunity, and start using it, Greg. Stop living out of a space and place of, I wasn't good enough. If you really knew me, you would have nothing to do with me. And not that I'm arrogant or overconfident, and I still have some of these insecurities, but the path is different. And my sense of wholeness is very different.
Mm. It's really beautiful that you had that authenticity in your heart and your soul, wanting to
Mm,
know what wasn't right and seeking people to help you find that. And then to be
mm,
shared something that was very profound and deep and rang true to you. And then to go to your wife, I think that all that to me takes incredible courage and wisdom and openness and authenticity and humility. All qualities I think are so important in life.
thank you.
I'm curious because you and I have just
Mm,
met, and to
mm,
me, you seem like a very gentle soul. You seem
mm.
in a very positive way, very soft and open. And when you look back to how you were approaching God, spirituality before, and then the second phase you're talking about, was there a big shift internally of more of a letting go than a doing, would you
Yes.
say? Yeah.
Yes. Yes, absolutely. I think I had defined my faith journey prior to that experience with Kempton as something I had to earn. It was couched in the negative of all that I wasn't, and that if you really knew me, you'd see this unlovable, worthless failure. And I came to see that all of the many blessings that have been poured out in my journey. And, you asked about practice, and probably one of the earliest practices after meeting Kempton was the attitude of gratitude. Every day, the first thing I do in the morning is to start with what am I grateful for? And sometimes in the days where I'm a little groggy, and it may be just the epiphany of I'm alive and above
Hmm.
ground, but when I'm clear and awakened, it's just to reflect on the people in my life who love me, the journey I've gotten to take, my health journey. Last year was probably one of the most challenging years of my physical life. I was diagnosed with a second dose of cancer, prostate cancer, in February. Eventually, that led to 37 radiation treatments.
Wow.
And then the week before I rang the bell, completing that journey, I was diagnosed with Parkinson's.
Wow.
And I will tell you that the moment my neurologist gave me that diagnosis, it was emotional.
Hmm.
But I was so grateful for her compassion and just how she reached out to me next to my wife and comforted me. But even the privilege that I've had of getting treatment at some of the finest healthcare in the world, great doctors, great care, and it's given me a sense of purpose. 2 weeks ago or 3 weeks ago, I had a 7-month follow up. And my neurologist said, I can't see any physical evidence you have Parkinson's. And I attribute that to not only my physical well-being. I think I've worked out every day since my diagnosis.
Hmm.
And what I tell myself is I don't have an excuse. It's part of, if I want to live long and live well, I've got to do that. But it's also tending to my emotional well-being, my spiritual well-being, and my mental well-being,
Hmm.
but not doing it solely for me, but how I can be a better husband, a better father, a better brother, a better friend, a better teacher.
Yeah, no, no, it's beautiful. When you were speaking, a few things popped to me. One is this is my perspective, and maybe some people don't agree with this, but I think as human psychology, if you just get to the root, I think most of it, there's a fear and a feeling that we're not enough, something enough,
Mm,
whatever that is, smart enough,
mm,
good looking enough, whatever it
yeah,
is, there's like this psychological thing of
yeah.
not being enough. And then we obviously
Mhm,
have the animal survival system. And then we have a soul or a spirit, whatever somebody wants to call it, where you just are everything and nothing, right? Because you come from the source of life. So that
mm,
is you, you're in that. But we're also like the humility of knowing that we're not special in the way that like, look
mm,
at me, I'm so special. So it's just this interesting dynamic to me of for the human experience of, and it's unique for each person, but how do we come to peace with the part of us that feels like you're not
mm,
enough?
yeah,
The thing that and everything that comes from that, whether it's fighting,
mm,
improving us, or giving up, whatever that may be for each person, then the survival mechanism in us, which I think triggers that psychological I'm not enough. And I think in our society, they're
mhm,
kind of like in cahoots.
yeah,
And
yeah,
then to rest in your soul. And I think before you even said it, I could hear very strongly that practicing gratitude and appreciation has changed a pathway and that there are different practices, and
Mm,
gratitude, it's not like some airy fairy thing. It's like basically you're wiring your brain in a way that is more in tune with the reality of life, the
mhm.
mystery and the magic.
While I was working out today, I listened to a podcast with Arthur Brooks being interviewed, and Arthur is Harvard Business School professor. He's about to launch another book. He co-wrote a book with Oprah Winfrey, and he was just talking about the studies of gratitude, the research validity behind it. That if you do it for, he said, 60 days, that there's good science that said you improve your happiness set point by 12%. 12
Yeah.
that.
Yeah. I mean, it
And
makes
I had
sense,
never
right?
heard that.
Yeah, it makes total sense. You may have heard this before, but I remember years ago when I really got into my own journey of trying to figure out what's the meaning of life? How do we make this thing work and not pretend? I heard
Mm,
this statistic about that the average human has 15 to 75,000 thoughts a day. And then they say most
mm.
of those thoughts we thought yesterday as well. And most of them on some level are negative about
Yeah.
ourselves. And I was
Yes.
like,
Yes.
wow, that's crazy. You want to be
Yes.
happy
Yeah.
and peaceful and
Yes.
confident, but inside
Yeah.
you have this thought factory saying, you're not
Yes.
enough, you're not enough. And so obviously the gratitude, like you're practicing, is saying, hey, wait a second. I don't need to be on that wheel of not enough. And I could see it just hearing you. I hear that as you today, like
Yeah. Thank
that
you.
gratitude in you, which is really beautiful.
The other, this is going to be crazy, but and there are some people out there that believe you can be too positive.
Mm,
But my view of the importance of positivity is that most of us are wired for negativity, right? To your point you just made about all those negative thoughts, and it's in our DNA. I mean, just taking a sort of biological view of humanity, that we represent the human beings in terms of the gene pool that got passed on because
mm,
we figured out how to survive. Our ancestors figured out how to survive. And you figure out how to survive by paying attention to the things that can harm and hurt and threaten you. So you're not going to unwire people from that. I mean, very few
mm,
people do not have fear. I mean,
mm,
whether it be spiders, whether it be, flying in commercial aircraft or being on a boat or, whatever your fear
mm.
is, that is a normal human emotion,
Yeah.
right? And so positivity is not sort of replacing it. It's balancing it.
Mm,
So the practice I do at night, and I'm very proud of as soon as I was diagnosed with Parkinson's, I began keeping this journal at night. It's called my positive points for daily living.
mm,
And I assign points to the good things that happen in the day.
mm,
And I try to get 100 points each day. I give if something that's a good daily practice, I'll give myself 5 points. Something that happens today that's week worthy, that's 10 points.
mm,
Something that is month worthy is 25. Something that is year worthy is 50. So, I'm not a great pianist, but I love to play. And I love to play because I love to sing.
uh,
And so if I want to get an easy 5 points for the day, carve out, 15 minutes to play the piano. That's 5 points. Behind my house is my carriage house where my daughter and two granddaughters spend half the week. When little Lucy, who's 5, shows up at my door in the morning to get her ready for school, that's easily 5. And if she's in a good mood, that's a 10-pointer.
that's great. That's
And
great.
I give myself 5 points for starting my day in gratitude. So again, and someone will say, well, why don't you track the negative points? Because when you touch a stove, you don't forget. If a client meeting goes badly, you don't forget. If
Hmm.
something happens, I am so wired to embrace the negativity and not forget, but I don't
Yeah.
track it.
Yeah, yeah, no, it makes total sense. Hearing you speak, I think your previous maybe discipline that felt maybe hard and tight on some level, I don't want to word it, but the way you talked about before, maybe, but you developed the habits of
Mm,
discipline and consistency. And then you somehow made this framework that really works for you in a joyful,
mm,
positive way.
yes.
So some people try to be positive in a way of avoiding
Mm,
things, maybe, I don't know, and they don't really believe it.
mhm,
But like hearing you speak, you can tell that this is a system that's working for you. And I think
yes,
everyone, again, that one spirit, many paths, if someone's like, wow, I want to do something like Greg, then they should figure out what is that for them? What
exactly.
point system works? But your gratitude and your point system
Yeah.
obviously is working for you, right?
Yes,
And
yes,
that's
yeah.
amazing. And that's beautiful. I think it's really cool
Thank
to
you.
find things that you know work for you that are
Yeah,
true.
yeah. The other two practices, about mental well-being. So I have the privilege of teaching leaders. I've done it for a good portion of my life, teaching them leadership, and certainly I have a bias of what constitutes effective leadership, and qualities of humility and compassion and purpose are part of that. But one of the most powerful constructs and quotes is from Viktor Frankl, who wrote this amazing book, Man's Search for Meaning. And that book is so referenced by so many people in the fields that you are in and I in terms of helping people grow and develop. And there's a quote that I reference in probably 90% of every time I stand up and teach, and it's from his book, and it says, between stimulus and response lies a space, and in that space lies the freedom to choose our response, and in that freedom to choose our response lies our power. And I call that a practice because the number of times that people sort of don't see the space, and more importantly, don't think and reflect on what's the most optimal thing for this situation, the people I'm with, the relationships I have, the purpose of the organization I serve, what's in their best interest. Because too often my response, being human, is an instinctive one, but what's best for me. Mm-hmm. But being able to see that space and take that pause and to say, okay, what does this relationship need? And what's the optimal behavior into that? So I think of that practice at least once a day. Mm-hmm. And then the second practice comes from the Jewish Talmud, this very beautiful little quote that says, we don't see the world as it is, we see the world as we are. And just reminding myself that my view of reality is my own, and it doesn't necessarily make it the same reality that you have. And so it allows me to sort of be humble to say, do I really know what's going on? And I think there's it was one of Stephen Covey's 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, but it was also attributed to St. Francis, this seek first to understand before being understood, and have the humility to accept that you may not know what you don't know. And more importantly, you may not even know mm-hmm. And it's those things you don't know that can get you most in trouble.
Yeah.
Right. So
the things you think you know that you don't know, right?
Yes. Yeah. Yes.
For me personally, my thing, I think, is always getting to the core of things. Like, well, what's behind that? What does that really mean? And all these things. And really what I hear is being an open, aware, conscious, mindful, open-hearted human being, applying that to whatever that is, and being humble enough to know that it's hard to even know what's going on with yourself, let alone someone else. So how do we be so open and available and humble and caring and kind to try to understand? Yeah. And usually when we're imposing, like I know for me, and I'm sure you've experienced this, like growing up, being captain in sports and different things, I didn't understand. I thought leadership meant to tell people what to do, and it didn't feel good for me or the people. And then at one point, even as like a sensei, I thought that's what you're supposed to do. And at one point I was like, no, this is not leadership. This is insecurity, and it's just not right. Thank you for saying that, because I once had a role in a large corporation where I put in place the first Leadership 360 online, and I went through it as sort of a guinea pig. And I got feedback that said I was a terrible listener, and thankfully, rather than respond defensively to that, to step back and go, could that be true? Yeah. I learned something. Yeah. I share that because when I graduated from West Point, which is considered one of the premier leadership development institutes and experiences, if you had told me at 21 that the most important leadership skill would be listening to others, I would have told you you're crazy. Like, listening, follow me. And the gift that has come my way is I realized that one of the patterns that I had pre-Kempton was this incessant need to be right and to win, because, I was trying to respond to the deeper patterns of I wasn't enough, I wasn't good enough, wasn't smart enough, wasn't enough, and only when I was enough would I be happy. And so to realize that you don't have to be right. And matter of fact, the more right you are, the probably less friends you have. Yeah, I'm always blown away. One of the martial arts I train in is called Sistema. And really what my sense of it has been is it's getting us back to being a natural human being and moving with freedom and trusting your system and not interfering. And really everything I hear you speaking, I feel like we're alluding to the same thing of, if you just show up as an open, present, loving human being, you can be a great leader. You don't have to tell people what to do, right? There's like a listening and a responding and a collaboration that happens. And for me to hear you, that I know of West Point, but I don't know their specific training, but to imagine leadership in a certain way, the way I feel like I hear you're saying it. And then for you to say, wait a second, this is not what I believe true leadership as, or a more effective way of leadership as. And for you to find this other way and now to teach that, I think is another testament to the transformation, which is, I just love that.
Yeah, thank you. West Point has had its own transformation because there was enough courageous leadership that took on that the leadership model for cadets was very different than the leadership model that they wanted a young lieutenant to practice with soldiers. And so West Point was known in its early days as an institution where hazing was
Mm,
actually sanctioned, and
mm,
the taking of the new freshmen and breaking them down and humiliating them and taking away their dignity as a belief that, only through this crucible of difficulty and hazing would you become a better person. And that's crazy, right?
yeah.
I mean, I am so embarrassed that when I was a young sophomore, after having been sort of treated terribly as a freshman, I then the abused became the abuser.
Hmm.
And thankfully, West Point now teaches the same model of leadership to its cadets that it expects lieutenants and officers to embody in leading soldiers that are a precious resource. The last thing you want to do is break them down. Now, that doesn't mean you don't want them to go through hard, difficult things, but make the hard things the task, not the
Hmm.
human being they have to be ordered around by.
I love that. That's really great because then they're working with the task and not dealing with the unhealthy, nurturing relationship. Instead of
Yes, yes,
being like a we, it becomes
yes,
this
exactly.
fight against your own teammate, really.
Yeah, exactly. And as a leader, my most important use is to make you feel valued, heard, respected, and that you're important,
Hmm.
and spend your time preparing how can you be as competent and capable as possible to accomplish the mission, the task that you've been assigned. And why would I want you not to do that to the best of your ability? Right.
Yeah,
So
no.
it's a very positive, motivational, inspirational model as opposed to a command and control, do it my way because I'm the boss.
Yeah, it's so interesting how things get passed down, and then whenever it takes
Mm,
a person or people to say, "Wait a second, this doesn't make
mhm,
sense. This is not
mhm.
serving us as much as it
Yeah.
could be." And I love that when systems like say like different religions. I think every religion at the core, I would imagine,
Mm,
is like love God, be kind, be a good person.
yes,
But somehow
exactly.
all of a sudden it becomes religions fighting each other
Mhm,
because their
mhm.
God is saying this, and it's like, wait a second.
Yeah, my God's better than your God.
Yeah, like, where
Yeah,
what is that? Where is that coming
yeah,
from?
yeah,
So,
yeah.
to me, your energy and your practices are very congruent with what I feel from you just meeting you. I'm curious, another
Thank
thing
you.
I of course, thank you for I could tell you've really looked at yourself, and the reason I called this podcast "The Spiritual Ninja" is I feel like it's kinda like that in the inner and outer world because we have to go inside of ourselves and
Mm,
understand all of it, and then
mhm,
figure out
mhm,
what is the deepest essence of who we are, and then how do we have a healthy relationship with things that come
mm,
up. So I was curious in your own inner workings, when things that come up for you, like sometimes it could be a small little thing and you're like, oh, that's that thing, and you just go on. But sometimes it could rock your insides. Do you have practices also for that with how you deal with fears and
yeah,
insecurities?
yeah. A perfect example is COVID. March 14th of 2020, I was sitting on a plane going to one of my clients, a hospital executive who I coached, and he sent me a text saying, "Don't come. This disease is beginning to have tremendous impact. We mandated that no visitors. We've mandated all these things." And for 19 years, I had been visiting clients just about every week that I wasn't, not on vacation or taking off, where I would show up on site. And I went into a sort of a tailspin of what was going to happen to this wonderful life I'd created, because all of my 90% of my clients were all healthcare organizations, and they just couldn't use my services at the time. I went into a deep place of fear, and about 2 weeks into it, as I bought toilet paper that I still have downstairs because it was very coarse, and boxes of ramen noodles and non-perishables. They're still down there.
Mhm.
You know, I was watching every minute of the news, and the news is predicated on, telling you all the things that are going to hurt and harm you. So it feeds you just, keep watching more and just makes you
Yep.
even more miserable. And I just said, this is not serving me well. And you know better, Greg. And I had written a book 2 years earlier called You Can't Give What You Don't Have that talked about my journey and some of the practices, gratitude and appreciation and meditation and mindfulness and physical activity. And so I had those things and I wasn't practicing them. So I call it, I went from the zone of fear into the zone of learning. And learning probably is my top strength of, I think, of all the gifts that I've been given. I love to learn. I love to share my learning with others. I have stacks of books everywhere if you looked in my office. And I'm, constantly telling, have you read this book? So that zone of learning, it was a time of like, okay, how do I use this time to prepare me for whatever's next? What did I need to learn? What did I need to know? Where did I need to grow? And I started sort of deepening my insight and expertise around post-traumatic growth and resilience and agility. I started offering presentations to clients who were struggling. If they couldn't afford it, I gave it away. And the more I spent time in this zone of learning, it allowed me to move into the third zone, the zone of contribution. I'm not perfect, and I slide back into fear, and I slide back into learning. But that to me has been a tremendous. When I read something that says AI is going to replace most of us, I go, okay, I can give into that, or to say, okay, what do I need to know? What do I need to learn? How can I use it? How can I leverage it? And it's been, it's been a gift, like
Yep.
how I've been using it in my client work the last couple months. It's been amazing. Right? So I think that's the practice to say, oh, where's the gift in this? Where's the opportunity in this? Where's the learning in this? A perfect example, I had a client that I speak at every January as they get ready to launch the new year. And they had gotten some feedback of my talk last year that said sometimes he mentions too much military stuff. Well, I sometimes do because those are my early developmental stories. But their whole theme of this conference was about music. So I reached out to the CEO and I said, I've got an idea for you. What if I built a workshop, 3 hours that you've given me, and talk about leadership, not from a military, but make it about using music as a metaphor for leadership? And he goes, well, what would that look like? And I gave him examples about how we can use tempo and rhythm and harmony and melody and putting people at table groups, giving them musical instruments, challenging them to say, okay, how do you listen to the other groups and find ways to blend and create these harmonies? I got feedback that it was the best workshop I'd ever had. But I will tell you, I was terrified going into it because I was in new territory and it was a little bit terrifying, but it turned out great. And
It's great.
it was a tremendous learning and growing experience.
Yeah. And I think hearing you say that, I think obviously you were open to the feedback about it being too military based. And in that openness of learning, the creativity was able to be connected to of what can I do? And because of your experience and love of music, the convergence happened in a way that you could use that. I think that's another, we'll discuss, more of this external impact of the internal work that we do. But I think that it's really important to realize that when we open up and are in this mode we're talking of learning, that's when the best creativity and solutions come to us. It's not from when we're trying to like grind and figure it out. There has to be that openness. And I love, again, you're using everything you've learned in your life, but in a more conscious way, it sounds like. And so being able to say, wait, something's going on with me right now. Oh, this is fear and my behaviors are coming from that. How can I switch to a learning mindset and a learning behavior? And then you took it further to how do I take this learning and contribute?
Yeah.
And so it's giving you this, again, this sequencing, this actions to do, but it's also an inner thing of shifting from fear to openness. I love that. It's really, really beautiful to hear. And when you were speaking earlier about seeing this not enoughness, that was a big turning point for me when I sat with that. And then I found that there was something in me that I believed to be stronger than that or separate from that. And then that disidentification of that started happening. And then that's where the learning and the creativity and contribution can really happen.
Yeah, you triggered a thought. I was coaching this neurosurgeon, and sometimes neurosurgeons, because it takes so long for them to develop mastery in their trade, sometimes they can be a bit self-absorbed. And I was coaching one who had gotten in some trouble in terms of some of his behaviors directed towards staff. And we had a remarkable relationship, and he was so grateful for our work together. He invited my wife and I to attend a retreat with him and his wife, where we got to listen to Tara Brach, a very, very popular, famous Buddhist teacher. And it was It was about meditation, but it was about equipping us with a very simple tool. And she recognized the goddess of, or the god that whoever comes and visits you, telling you you're not enough.
Mm,
And she told us to, when those insecurities showed up, to give that a name. And so I called mine Bob. So when Bob showed up in my life, rather than wishing that Bob wasn't there, and or listening to Bob tell me I was no good and not good, who do you think you are? What Tara suggested is that I welcome Bob in, because at some point I developed some of those responsive I'm not enough as either a response to some trauma in childhood, or as a way just to protect myself. And so at some point, Bob played an important part in my life. And so rather than wish Bob wasn't there, acknowledge Bob, thank Bob for his presence in my life, engage in a little tea party with Bob to say, here, Bob, have some tea with me.
mm,
And then once I had sort of recognized and appreciated Bob, just to thank Bob for coming. And now it was time for Bob to leave. And you may think I'm crazy, or others listening
no.
this may think so, but I have used that tool not only with myself, but probably hundreds, if not more, of coaching conversations, because it was such a powerful tool that all of us can access. What makes the human species so incredible and extraordinary? We have these gifts where we actually can have these imaginary conversations, right?
Hmm. Hmm.
We can get on the proverbial balcony and sort of look down and going, now's not the time to do that, Greg. Come
Mm.
up with a better strategy than that.
Yeah, no, and that's amazing. Like you're saying, I remember years ago when I graduated college, I was in New York City, and I was really, doing this searching, and somebody started speaking to me about, oh, there's like these different personalities within human beings, and I was like,
Mm,
oh, I mean, everybody has that. I'm not crazy. We all have like these different perspectives within us, like this whole family of whatever thoughts and
yes,
feelings. And so I did a similar thing, it was different, but similar. At one point, I just realized, like, okay, this is part of the human condition, of this
yes,
psychology of feeling
yes,
that way. And I think it's tied into survival and all that. And I was like, okay, I see that. And I think me, as awareness and love and
mm,
consciousness,
mm,
that I can take care of that better
mm,
than that can take care of what it's trying to do.
yeah,
So it's almost like, hey, I'll take care of you now. You're good. You can just relax and I'll be in
yes,
charge. And
yes,
I think
yeah,
it gave me a similar thing of seeing it for what it is and seeing the Bob in me of just a
yeah,
part of humanity, and it's
yeah,
okay.
yeah.
And I don't have to fight
You
it.
you've my observation, you've used the word love many times, and it just strikes me as it's very natural when you use it. And I this is something I need to, in terms of, you asked where's my growing opportunity. I think it's to speak more naturally about probably the greatest human emotion
Hmm.
that we have. And boy, if we could nurture it and cultivate it and practice it, what a world we would have.
Yeah, I was recently speaking on the podcast to a psychologist who's a spiritual teacher as well. He and I both kept saying love and awareness over
Mm,
and over again. And I feel that there are many components of it, but I think for me personally, one component is just having this consciousness of the bigger picture, like
mm,
not getting so caught up in the grind of daily life and remembering that we're all souls and whatever it may
yeah,
be, each person's
yeah,
interpretation here. And then having that awareness and then being present to what we're doing and putting love into it. Cause love to me is
mm,
like the blood of it. It's the thing that gives the fulfillment. And
that's
so to be
beautiful.
able to,
Yeah.
yeah, to be able to show up, and even in martial arts, we
Mm,
teach that of like, if you and I were wrestling or doing something, we're trying to work together where we're both feeling taken care of and appropriately challenged, instead of when I used to wrestle, I was like, can I just pin the person? Right. And so now we try to teach this human relationship training through
wow,
martial arts. And I
that's
think
awesome.
yeah, I love it. Using the word again. When I got really into meditation at one point, I was experiencing love, but I also got very skilled, for lack of better words, of being like the witness.
Mm,
And there's incredible wisdom to that, but it also could
mm,
be detached.
mm,
And I think bringing the love into it and making that the focal point of just an open heart and being
mm,
present, it gives so much richness to everything. And
yes,
I
yes.
really, I find that's such an important part. And I think for some people, if they tend to be more cerebral, that really helps them a lot get more into their body, more grounded. And then if people tend
Mhm.
to be too overly emotional for them, learning how to be rooted and more, maybe more in the bigger picture witness perspective. So I think for each of us, finding that perfect blend of integration and going into our strengths and our challenges together. I think are really,
Mhm.
really wonderful.
Yeah, I am. I spend some time whenever I start a workshop, I'm giving a presentation. I'm going to New Orleans on Monday to work with a couple clients, and I will always start a session from either a place of what are you most grateful for. But one I've been using probably the last several months is think of a time over the last several months at work when you experienced awe or joy.
Mm, mm.
And some people like I mean I've had some people say, well, I don't like that word joy.
Yeah. Like, why not? I do corporate things sometimes, and it's always interesting. I have a personal development system that's kind of like an operating system that I use for everything.
Is
And
that right?
yes, and so
Huh.
I'll do corporate stuff or school teachers or parenting, and anywhere I go, it doesn't matter what it is, it's the same foundational teaching,
Mm,
and the general gist of it is that in any moment, we can be putting too much tension into what we're doing, regardless of the reason. We call that ice because you're kind of frozen and stuck, and we have images of it. And then when you're not engaging with life enough, you feel kind of lazy and bored. We call it a
mm,
puddle. And then when you're
mm,
flowing and paying attention, doing your best and learning, you're more like a river. And
mm.
we use our three B's, our body, our breathing, and our brain as our monitor to check in, and also as our dials to improve the quality of our river flow. And so it's all starting
Love
with
that.
that. And then I
Yeah,
have like all my books and different things give practices for the body, for the breathing, for the brain of how do you check in and adapt in real time to how
beautiful.
you're showing up. And
Yeah,
I think,
yeah,
again, it's this
yeah.
integration of the body,
Yes,
mind, spirit. And
yes, yes. Love
so I
that.
think when I go into the corporate world, it's always great because the people often, just like parenting, they think you're going to tell them how to do something. But when you show them, I always share that most of us are never taught how to live. We're taught how to like do your job or do this, but not how to live.
Mm,
And what I feel like
mm.
we're doing is we're helping people learn how to live so then they can do what they're doing. And
Yes.
I,
Wow.
I love that.
Yeah, but to be able to even step back and check in regarding your awareness of my ice, am I in a puddle or if I'm a moving river and I'm not feeling like the river right now, so what can I do to bring that about? Those metaphors are powerful because most of us think and talk. We don't realize how metaphors are so powerful for us.
Yeah. And it's beautiful too, because for me, the whole family, like we work with little kids, teenagers, adults, and
Mm.
I hear stories sometimes from like a parent saying, my 4-year-old kid is the back seat saying, Mom, you're being a little icy. I think you should do your ninja breathing right now. So it's
Wow.
something that
That's
they can
cool.
interact with
Yeah,
and support each other in. And
that's
so it's,
beautiful.
yeah, I really appreciate that. Because I think for all of us, when you ask people what's important to them, most people will say their family. And I think we're always so busy doing, like you were
Mhm.
referring to
Mhm.
earlier, that we're doing family instead of
Yes.
being
Yes,
family. And
being
I think,
family. Mhm.
yeah, I think most of us need to unlearn and learn how to do that.
Mm,
Even
mm,
though it's innate,
mhm,
there's our
mhm.
fear mechanisms are being so triggered
Yeah.
today that
Mhm.
it's tricky. So
Beautiful.
what I hear and see from you is that you've gone on this journey and you're in a very aware, wise, I would say very loving place
Mm,
because of the softness and how you communicate.
mm, mm.
And I would imagine, just as I feel with you, very comfortable and connected when you're working with leaders. So I'm curious from this transformation, this way that you are today, how has that directly impacted your outer performance, your outer
Yes, yes.
creativity, your the
Thank
systems
you.
you're creating, the teaching? Yeah.
Yeah. I am my son is a marijuana farmer and I'm open about that. And as you might imagine, that created some conflict in our younger days when
Hmm.
I thought it would be very harmful for him. And certainly, if he did that kind of work in Georgia, he'd be wearing orange. So he moved out to Oregon. And just 3 weeks ago, he was married by me and with his bride in this beautiful, looked like the set of Fantasy Island in just south of Puerto Vallarta on this beautiful beach. There was about 100 people in attendance. The weather was perfect. The setting was perfect, but the true joy of celebration of having all of my 5 grandchildren, my 4 children, the relationships, the joy we had with each other was not, it wasn't fake. There was nothing
Hmm.
inauthentic. It was completely authentic. And for me, it was a reflection of, this is what heaven must look like. The boat it took, well over an hour to take all the guests to this remote scene, and it wasn't coming back until well after 11. And just the joy of watching my family, celebrate life and celebrate
Mm,
love and celebrate connection. And it was magical. And I share it only because I think it just didn't happen. We've been building the pieces,
yeah,
the relationships, the positivity, the mutual support, the mutual respect, and above all else, I got to be the minister, and we had these
amazing.
crazy wild parrots flying over where I was opening up the ceremony, and I just had the presence to say, and even the wildlife are celebrating this magnificent day of love and joy and of family, and how happy we are all to be here together on this beautiful day.
Amazing, amazing. Yeah, no, and again, hearing you speak, I hear the love, even if you're not,
Mm,
even if you don't say that a lot in your professional life, it comes out of you so clearly, and the joy and the
mm,
gratitude. And I think it's so beautiful that you're in the corporate world, coming from the military background and offering this to people, because I think that's what people really need and want. And to
yes,
see your
yes.
family like that, so many times in this podcast, I've been brought to tears just because
Mm,
of the beauty of humanity, of this love, this soul, this connection, this care, and then getting
mm,
to experience that with your kids and your grandkids, and seeing all
mhm.
this come together in that way. And even in the sharing about your different challenges with your health and how you're working with all that, and all of that is the backdrop of
Yes,
this beauty and this wonder.
thank you.
No, definitely. Thank you. For in your corporate training now, is
Yes,
that what you say,
yes.
corporate leadership training?
Well, I call it leadership development, education, and coaching.
Okay. So
A
is
lot
it
of
predominantly
one-on-ones.
is it predominantly with people in the business world, whether it's their own
Yes,
business or a corporate?
yes, yes.
So do you find that for most of your clients, they're aware of the quality of your presence, of how you are today, and that's kind of what has brought them to you, whether they're aware of it or not? Or do you think also that just because of your systems and your reputation and your business?
That's a great
Yeah.
that's a great question, because a part of me says if I could go back 24 years when I started, I would have been more instrumental about systems, and yet I've never had a bad week, a bad month, a bad year in doing this work, and the work has been plentiful. Again, I'm so blessed and grateful. And I'd like to think if I paraded my clients to tell me about Greg,
Mhm.
I don't think they would reference the systems and the structures. I think they would reference my listening, which is amazing in itself. They would articulate that, he knows me, he cares about me, he brings an authenticity and vulnerability that makes it easy for others to open up and to share theirs. I facilitated a 2-day session in Chicago last week, and it was with 20 leaders. And I asked that joy question. I just talked about my journey, and I was vulnerable about what I had been experiencing in terms of the journey with being told by my neurologist that there's no visible evidence of Parkinson's.
Mhm.
And it just opened up where people began to talk about not just the joy and the things that were working, but to talk about the challenges. And just turned out that in this group of 20, several were dealing with parents who were declining in health and needed to make decisions about, they couldn't live independently anymore.
Mhm.
And then dealing with young children. And I mean, just everybody started showing up with this sense of, here are the things that are working, but let me be clear. Here's the struggle.
Mhm.
And there's these Cleveland Clinic empathy videos that if you go into your browser and put Cleveland Clinic empathy videos, have you ever seen them?
No, I haven't.
They're beautiful because what you do is you follow people in a sort of a everyday of people going in and out of a hospital,
Mhm.
and you see the bubble over their head of what they're really thinking, and
Mm.
one person just got told that they're being served with divorce papers. Another one got told that they're cancer free after 5 years.
Mm.
Someone else just found out that their adoption came through.
Yeah.
And it's just a powerful reminder in 4 minutes that you don't know what people are carrying. And
Mm.
it turns out whether you're Jeff Bezos or Greg, we're all carrying stuff.
Yep. No,
That's
it's
the
right on.
human condition, right?
Yeah. No, that is that. I think once we really look at ourselves, and like you're saying, I've been very blessed too, but regardless if someone feels blessed or not, if you look inside your mind, there's a lot of confusion and
Mm,
chaos and insecurities and fears. And then if you're able to navigate and get to a place where you can not be controlled by it,
Mhm.
you realize how much awareness and effort and love and
Mm.
wisdom it took. And then to realize that everyone's going through their own battle, whether they're aware of it or not, there's still
Yes,
that
that's
battle
right.
happening, right?
Yes, yes, yes,
And
yeah.
so I think
Certainly
that's,
the struggle.
yeah, yeah. Just it's like underneath, there's like this angst in most people because
Mm.
something isn't right and they don't know how to get it right and how to deal with the part of us that doesn't feel right. So I think so being in the role that you do as far as leadership, if you just got to the gist of what you hope or what you would if someone said to you, I want to be the most effective leader that I can be in everywhere in my life, my family, my work, my all my relationships, are there some few things that you would say, these are the most important practices I believe as a leader?
I think one of the most important, you've used the word awareness, self-awareness many times. Even if you look at the code of Hammurabi, from the Sumerians back 10,000 years ago, they even talked about the quality of be self-aware. If you look at the Marine Corps, the Army, 10 principles of leadership, the first one is know thyself. And so the practice of checking in with yourself, like who is showing up at this moment? And if I'm angry or and I'm in a state of fear or negative emotion, that's going to cloud not only what I say, but how I view. Again, we don't see the world as it is, we see the world as we are.
Mm.
And so the capacity to use that self-awareness to say, okay, now that I've checked in, who do I want to be? What's my intention?
There's that
You
space
talked
again,
about,
right?
yeah, you talked about, sort of an operating system. And one of the leaders I was with last week, he used a word called firmware.
Mm.
That by the age of 8 or 9, our firmware is set in place. And he sent me a very nice note afterwards saying, "Can you really change firmware?" And I said, "Well, I wouldn't be in this work if I didn't believe we could, but it's
Yeah,
hard. It's hard
yeah,
work."
yeah.
Right? Because there's certain patterns of who I am, like the stripes on a zebra. You can actually get zebras to run slower or faster, but you can't remove the stripes.
Mhm.
And so knowing what's a stripe
Yeah.
and what's changeable, and even then recognizing what's changeable, like, Greg, you don't listen very well. Well, it's one to say I acknowledge that as a deficiency and an opportunity for my growth. It's another thing to say, okay, how do I develop listening as a positive, intentioned practice in my life?
Mm, mm,
And so you have to be committed to that. You have to be intentional about it. You got to be disciplined about it. You got to have friends who are willing to give you feedback that says, Greg, I know you're committed to listening better, but at this moment, you're doing terrible.
yeah.
And I have a choice then to say, instead of like being defensive, like, who are you? Like,
Mhm,
I thank you. Thank you.
mhm.
That was a gift. And I deeply appreciate you having the courage to give me that feedback.
Humility once again, right?
Yes, yeah. And curiosity. If I've got a third leadership book in me, I want to talk about humility, compassion, and curiosity.
Mhm,
I think these are three very important leadership qualities that are not taught as much as I think they should and can and
mhm,
must be.
mhm,
Right. I am worried about the world. Someone wrote me a note yesterday saying they're at some conference and two of the speakers talked about there's going to be a global conflict in 18 months. What do you think, Greg?
mhm.
Well, I'm not putting that on the top of my list
Yeah.
to focus on every day.
Mhm,
Um, because it's out of my control. What is in my control to go vote? What's in my
mhm,
control is to know the issues. What's in my control is in my circle of influence, be the person that you aspire to be. Be a person of compassion. Be
mhm,
humble. Be authentic. Be purposeful. Right. And you have a choice, Greg, each and every moment of your life. Now, it doesn't make it easy to choose the right things, but
mhm,
begin first with where is the better choice?
mhm,
And how do I take a pause so that before you cut me off on the road and before I do something stupid, pause. Between stimulus and response lies a space.
mhm,
Here's a space. I don't know
mhm,
what's going on with this person who cut me off, but assume that they've got something important to go to. And them getting in front of you is going to probably impact you by, zero point 0.5 seconds. And is that worth it to get in a place in a state of anger? No, no, it's not. It's not worth it. Let it go. There's
yeah.
too many more
That's
important things in life to put my attention effort into.
mm. No, it's right on. So what I'm hearing, and you can correct me if I'm not saying it right, as a leader, the first thing would be to be very self-aware and be able to self-manage or whatever you want to call it with parenting. I'll say first
Hmm.
thing is parent yourself,
Yeah.
right?
Yes,
So
that's right.
that
Yeah.
self-awareness, that
Yeah.
self-management, that self-love, all that.
Hmm.
And then really the next part of that, which is obviously connected to that too, of really being able to listen and hear and see and feel what's in front of
Yeah.
you and who's in front of you.
Yeah. Yeah, I told this to our mutual friend Laurel. There's this beautiful. She knows about this Zulu greeting, "Sobono." I guess its perfect translation is "I see you," but its cultural translation is "I see you as a human, like I am human, with all of the aspirations, the hopes, and the dreams, and the struggles that the human condition requires, and I see you, and just seeing you matters."
Hmm.
And always in Zulu, yebo is yes. So bono, I see you,
Hmm.
right? And I think that's another practice of leadership. Assume there's a psychological circle around you that the people you've been entrusted to lead are in. Do
Hmm.
they feel like they belong? Do they feel like they matter? Do they feel like that someone cares about them? Do they feel that they're being led well? That the organization we're a part of, the team we're part of, has a clear sense of mission and purpose that's noble and meaningful. And so my job as the leader is to cultivate that sense of belonging. I think it's all a need that we have.
Hmm.
I don't think we always pay attention to it as well as we can and should.
Yeah, I think the we makes all of us feel way better than the me. It's just the reality of it. And so I think whether it's a family and each family or business has their own unique way, of course, but to have self-awareness, to have the we mentality, to have a clear vision, purpose, mission of what the we are doing or what is it a family just helping each other get through the day and take care of the home and all of that? Is it a business with a service or a product? Getting clear on what that is. And then I guess finding each person's roles and having some kind of operating way that people know what to do and how to do and have some kind of communication. Is that kind of the overall?
Yeah, well said. The only thing I would add is that just as I shared with you that I think it's a spiritual practice of being able to see the space and to be thoughtful about how to optimize that space, I think good leaders are also constantly scanning the environment of what's really going on, and to begin first from with a beginner's mind that says, I probably don't understand the situation as fully as I should. Who else could help me see that? Who else could give me perspective that I need to fully appreciate at this moment? And yes, that takes a little bit of time, but that little bit of time can heal a lot of problems by, again, the capacity for human beings to be curious, to be thoughtful, to be reflective, and to get out of their own instincts to serve themselves. And how can I serve this situation? How can I serve my family, my brothers and sisters, my team, my colleagues? And what's the next best thing that we can collectively do together?
I feel like you've already answered this question, but I'm going to ask it anyhow. If you go back to the beginning of our conversation of your relationship with God, with
Hmm.
spirituality, and then the question, I guess maybe twofold. One is, do you feel there's a purpose of human life? And if so, what is that? And then
Yeah.
how would you
Yeah.
see that in relation to leadership
Yeah.
and working with business
Thank you.
leaders?
Thank you for asking that question because it allows me to connect the dots for myself, and hopefully it'll
Mm,
do so for you. Because when I told you that I had this epiphany with Kempton, and I realized that just being born was a gift, and I'd been saved, right, by being born into this world when I did, where I was. I guess the life journey has said that God's given us this great gift called free will, and He's designed us perfectly. I don't know if it's in His or her image, but I know that we've been given so much. And the brain size, I mean, the human brain is magnificent, and we have everything we need to make the world safe and productive and to feed the world. I mean, we have used harness science in remarkable ways. AI is, in its best use is unbelievable, but that's what human beings are capable of. So if we can create that, we also can create lasting peace. But I think it's going to take a lot of help and support to get there. So I believe that, my purpose of my life is to be the best version of myself.
mm,
And the only way I can get to that is, one, I have to be intentional about what does the best version of me look like. And it's one of virtue. It's courageous. It's being just. It's being loving. It's about being temperate, and it's about trying to be wise. And the only way you can get there is by recognizing that life is going to throw you curves and challenges and struggles, and not to see those bad things as, I only want good things to surround me. Well, good luck.
Yeah.
Because especially given what you do for a living as well, martial arts requires a tremendous amount of discipline and some sense of doing hard things, right? And I think whenever difficult things show up in my life, the response is, okay, where's the opportunity to learn and grow? When COVID showed up in my life, it was a terrible time for our world. But, we got through it. I know we've declared war on vaccines in many places. When the head of the NIH found out that we had a workable vaccine that had a 94% efficacy, he cried. An extraordinary, momentous that we had the capacity to be able to download the genetic blueprint of COVID and then create a vaccine that was a viable 94%, right? Like,
That's amazing.
it is amazing. And so,
I know the scientists were like, but I saw something with these scientists and they all were just so blown away what they were able to do working together in that way.
War is a terrible thing, and certainly World War II was global and affected every life in the world at the time. I think of 1943 as a year in America that was extraordinary. We were fighting in 2 theaters. We couldn't make enough planes and tanks and trucks fast enough. And then by 1945, we were making a B-24 every hour by the Ford company. And Ford was known for making cars, not planes.
Amazing.
One of the most extraordinary exhibits is the Saturn V rocket on its side down in Cape Kennedy at the NASA. If you go into the park, these beautiful buses take you to the launch pads and take you back to that Saturn V rocket. And that rocket still is the most powerful rocket ever created by humankind, and put a man on the moon. What a remarkable accomplishment. It's just another sign of evidence that when we harness, the capability of humankind for the right things, for noble purposes, we can achieve so much goodness. But we have some spiritual practice to do to get there.
Yeah. I'm curious about it, using what you're referring to. If you just look at the world condition, and I know there's always so much going on that we don't know about and all of that, but I feel like there are so many conscious leaders, there's so many just good, moderate human beings that want the best for themselves and their family and for all of mankind. And it just seems interesting somehow that the loud, extreme views are getting most of the airtime and making the rules. And it seems to me, I'm not in that world, but in my own perspective of it, it seems like there's enough intelligent, capable, open-minded, loving human beings that could run the world in a way that would be, like you're saying, all these miracles that were possible we can do together and create, that would just be like heaven on earth, like you're talking about for the common person, not just for people that have worked hard to experience that.
Absolutely. Could not agree more with you.
You always just hope. And there's many ways people can say, oh, with God's plan, all these things, but it's also, like you said, that we all have a choice to try to show up, be the best people that we can be, and to really say, are we loving humanity as much as possible?
Yes.
And we're really looking at the we.
Yeah. Well said.
So,
yeah, absolutely.
Well, I feel so thankful for this experience of this podcast, because I'm just getting to spend time with people like you that I have never met before. And I feel so much, I'll say the word love again. I feel so much love and care and connection with you, and appreciation and respect for you and your personal work, and then how you're sharing it with the world.
Well, I feel honored that I'm even here with you. So thank you.
It's my
you're
true pleasure.
doing good work.
Well, thank you. I'm thoroughly enjoying it. And it's funny because probably like you experienced when you're at the wedding with the parrots and all, so many things you just kind of in the moment, you're like, oh, this thing just kind of happens. And then when you start looking at it, you're like, wow, this is helping me. This is something that somehow just this natural thing happened. I wasn't planning on doing this. Now I'm like, wow, I love this. This is like feeding my soul. So I'm so thankful.
My confession to you is I don't use that word love enough. And one of the things I'm taking away from our time together is that's a practice I need to be much more explicit about, because I can't think of a more profound spiritual practice than than love and compassion, right?
Yeah, no, I'm with you.
And
I
if we,
think
we had love and compassion for ourselves, for others, for nature, for this incredible planet, if we truly had that love and compassion, I think we'd be protecting it a lot more carefully.
it's right on. It's so simple. Love and
Yes,
awareness.
yes,
Can I show up having an open heart to love what's in front of me? And then life becomes this incredible weeing together,
yeah.
not this battle, right?
I love that.
So
Yeah. I've never heard someone call it weeing.
yeah, I've never said that before, actually.
Well, this has just been delightful. And one of the things I really appreciate about you is just how gifted you are at asking questions to keep the conversation flowing and going. And I think it's remarkable. I don't know how many people you've had on, but you do that you do it very well, and it seems quite natural.
I appreciate that. Yeah, I think it's just practicing, like you're talking about, practicing presence and awareness and love,
Mm,
and then having a genuine interest to connect. And then I think that's just kind of my experience of this whole thing and how I try to live. But in these moments, it's like, oh, this is all about me and this soul being together and having this conversation of it and trusting that it'll go where it's going to go.
awesome. Well, it's a privilege and a pleasure to be with you.
Thank you for being part of the Spiritual Ninja podcast. I really appreciate you being here. My goal with the podcast is to share heart to heart, soul to soul conversations. So if you would be so kind to share and to follow, that helps me get the word out about the podcast. Okay. Thank you and hope to see you on another podcast soon.